Good morning. It is Tuesday, April 13th, 2021. And today I want to read from the book Letting Go by David Hawkins, and specifically chapter 6 on fear. The many faces of fear are familiar to us all. We have felt free-floating anxiety and panic. We have been paralyzed and frozen by fear, with its accompanying palpitations and apprehension. Worries are chronic fears. Paranoia is its extreme. In milder forms of fear, we are merely uneasy. When it is more severe, we become scared, cautious, blocked, tense, shy, speechless, superstitious, defensive, distrustful, threatened, insecure, dreading, suspicious, timid, trapped, guilty, and full of stage fright. There is fear of pain and suffering, fear of living, fear of loving, fear of closeness, fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of God, fear of hell, fear of damnation, fear of poverty, fear of ridicule and criticism, fear of being trapped, fear of inadequacy, fear of danger, fear of disapproval, fear of boredom, fear of responsibility, fear of making a decision, fear of authority, fear of punishment, fear of change, fear of loss, fear of violence, fear of losing control, fear of feelings themselves, fear of manipulation, fear of being found out, fear of heights, fear of sex, fear of being on your own and being responsible, and fear of fear itself. How many of you feel fear on a daily basis? Anyone? Jeff, you're it. You're the only one. Damn. Brave crowd. What one holds in mind tends to manifest. What this means is that any thought which we consistently hold in mind and consistently give energy to will tend to come into our life according to the very form in which our mind has held it. The thing that we most want to be conscious of when we're feeling any form of fear is what? The thing that when we feel any level of fear, anxiety, worry, doubt, dread, anything like that, what do we want to be conscious of?
It's temporary.
Exactly. Whatever it is, that's the first thought you want to go to. Whatever this thing is temporary. And it's not final. It's not forever. It's not fatal. Because that's what we tend to do with our fears. We tend to project them as being final, forever, and fatal, when in fact, no matter what the fear is, no matter what it is, it's temporary. And when we feel fear, what is our natural response?
To retreat from it.
Right, to try and push it away. And what do we want our response to be?
To move towards it.
We want to embrace it. We want to let it in. We want to be curious. Okay. Why am I feeling this way? What is it that I'm afraid of? And one of the questions we want to ask ourselves whenever we feel fear, all right, what would the worst possible outcome be? What would the worst possible outcome be? And what would I do if that happened? If my worst fear was realized, what would I do? And the answer to that question is always the same. And the answer is what? Anyone?
Survive.
What have you done with every single fear that you've ever faced in your life?
Confront it.
Say it again.
Confront it.
Yeah,
Survived.
you've dealt with it. And the Stoics called it the premeditation of evils. And they would always go to worst case scenario and realize that they can handle it. No matter what it is, they can handle it. And the truth is you've dealt with every fear in the same way. In some way, you can handle it. And now with all the work that we're doing, you have many more tools to deal with fear. And you also have the realization that fear is what?
Temporary.
An ally.
Fear is good. Fear is good. We want more fear, not less fear. And we want more fear because we want to build that muscle of understanding there's nothing to be afraid of. There's nothing to be afraid of. Whatever it is temporary. And whatever it is will pass. It will pass. It will pass as long as we do what?
Don't suppress it.
As long as we take it in and let it go, rather than what?
Run away from it.
Resist it. Rather than resist it. Fear is associated with our survival. And so it is given a special accord in our minds. For most people, fear is so all pervasive that their life really constitutes one giant set of compensatory devices to conquer their fears. We are caught between living a fear of living and a fear of dying. No matter where we turn, fear. And so again, in the past, most of you haven't known how to really take on fear. And so you've pushed it away. You've resisted it. And therefore it lives inside of you. Now the idea is every time you feel any level of fear, to embrace it and get curious about it and lean into it and deal with whatever is happening and then let the fear pass. Bring it into your life, deal with it, let it pass, versus when you feel it, push it away. As we consistently let go of resisting our fears and allow them to be surrendered, the energy that was tied up in the fear is relinquished and now becomes available to shine forth as the energy of love. Therefore, unconditional love has the greatest power of all. So again, it takes a tremendous amount of energy to keep resisting your fears. And when you begin embracing whatever it is you're afraid of, and then letting it pass, it frees up a tremendous amount of energy. One of the blocks to emotional development is the fear of what lies buried in our unconscious. Carl Jung called this area, which we are unwilling to look at and to own, the shadow. He said that the self cannot become healed and whole unless we look at and acknowledge the shadow. This means that buried within us all is what Jung called the collective unconscious, is everything that we most dislike admitting about ourselves. The average human, he said, would much rather project his shadow onto the world and condemn it and see it as evil, thinking that his problem is to battle with evil in the world. In actuality, the problem is merely to acknowledge the presence of such thoughts and impulses in ourselves. By acknowledging them, they become quiet. Once they are quiet, they no longer unconsciously run us. In looking at our fears of the unknown, which are really fears of what is in the depths of the unconscious, it is useful to have a sense of humor. Once looked at and acknowledged, the shadow no longer has any power. How many of you deep down think you're really bad or evil? Well, let me say it different. How many of you think you might have some bad thoughts? How many have ever wanted to kill the driver in front of you because they were going too slow and you were 5 minutes behind on your appointment? Anyone ever curse that person out? That's called what? What is that called?
Projection.
Owning your power.
It's called being normal. That's what it's called. It's called being normal. Once looked at and acknowledged, the shadow no longer has any power. In fact, it is only our fear of these thoughts and impulses that give them any power. Once we become acquainted with our shadow, we no longer have to project our fears upon the world, and they begin to evaporate rapidly. Everybody secretly harbors the fear that they are dumb, ugly, unlovable, and a failure. Everybody secretly harbors the fear that they are dumb, ugly, unlovable, and a failure. What do we need to do there? Anyone?
Let it pass.
Let it go.
First, we have to do what?
Acknowledge it.
Acknowledge. Acknowledge that we think we're not good enough. We think we're bad. We think we're never going to succeed. Those are normal thoughts. Everyone has them. It's okay. Acknowledge it and do what? Let it go. Let it go. It takes a lot of energy to keep the shadow buried and to suppress our multitude of fears. The result is energy depletion. On the emotional level, it is expressed as an inhibition of the capacity to love. The more fear we hold, the more fearful situations we attract to our life. Each fear requires additional energy to create a protective device until finally all of your energy is drained into our extensive defensive measures. The willingness to look at a fear and work with it until we are free of it brings about immediate rewards. We have the unconscious fantasy that fear is keeping us alive. This is because fear is associated with our whole set of survival mechanisms. We have the idea that if we were to let go of fear, our main defense mechanism, we would become vulnerable in some way. Can anyone relate to this? Somehow fear, we need to have fear. It's a protective device.
You have to be vigilant all the time.
Right, right. We have the idea if we were to let go of fear, our main defense mechanism, we would become vulnerable in some way. In reality, the truth is just the opposite. Fear is what blinds us to the real dangers of life. In fact, fear itself is the greatest danger that the human body faces. It is fear and guilt that bring about disease and failure in every area of our lives. We could take the same protective actions out of love rather than fear. Can we not care for our bodies because we appreciate and value them rather than out of fear of disease and dying? Can we not be of service to others in our life out of love rather than out of fear of losing them? Can we not be polite and courteous to strangers because we care for our fellow human beings rather than because we fear losing their good opinion of us? Can we not do a good job because we care about the quality of our performance and we care about our fellow workers? Can we perform our job well because we care about the recipients of our services rather than just the fear of losing our jobs or pursuing our own ambition? Can we not accomplish more by cooperation rather than by fearful competition? Different way of looking at things. The next thing he gets into in this chapter, and I really want you to pay attention to this, is guilt. Guilt. One particular form of fear is what we call guilt. Guilt is always associated with a feeling of wrongness and potential punishment, either real or in fantasy. If punishment is not forthcoming in the external world, it expresses itself as self-punishment on an emotional level. Guilt accompanies all of the negative emotions, and thus, where there is fear, there is guilt. If you think a guilty thought and have somebody test your muscle strength, you will see that the muscle instantly goes weak. Your cerebral hemisphere has become desynchronized, and all of your energy meridians are thrown out of balance. Nature, therefore, says that guilt is destructive. How many of, if you really think about it, walk around with some level of guilt all the time? Right? I must be doing something wrong. Anyone ever have that thought? I must be doing something wrong. 99% of guilt has nothing whatsoever to do with reality. Guilt is really self-condemnation and self-invalidation of our worth and value as a human being. Is anyone on this call a poster child for guilt? Yes or no? I know a few of you.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm there too.
99% of guilt has nothing whatsoever to do with reality. Guilt is self-condemnation and self-invalidation of our worth and value as a human being. Guilt is as prevalent as fear, and we feel guilty no matter what we are doing. A part of our mind says that we really ought to be doing something else, or whatever we are actually doing at the moment, we ought to be doing better. We should be getting a better golf score. We should be reading a book instead of watching television. We should make love better, cook better, run faster, grow taller, be stronger, be smarter, be more educated. In between the fear of living and the fear of dying is the guilt of the moment. We seek to escape it by remaining unaware of it through suppression, repression, projecting it onto others, and escapism. Guilt represents death, just as love represents life. Guilt is part of the smaller self and underlies our willingness. Listen to this. Guilt is the part of the smaller self and underlies our willingness to believe negative things about ourselves. Think about how quickly we can buy into any negative thought about ourselves, and then how much resistance we have to the reality that our inherent nature is that we are perfect, infinite possibility, and one with life.
Do you mind if I ask a question?
Go ahead.
Well, first of all, that description of guilt, I was like, first I was like, oh, that's not me. Oh my God, that's totally me. So in reading the book, maybe I'm not there yet. What is the process that he references of letting go?
Anyone want to answer that?
I do.
Go ahead.
It takes me back to what you've said a number of times, Steve. Take a deep breath, and just do it. Just let it go.
It's the first thing is the realization that, hey, I'm actually doing this to myself. I mean, this idea of guilt, I had the same reaction. Wow, I've got a lot of guilt. And it's the realization that you're walking around with this stuff. It's the realization that how much fear plays into your life. And again, it simply is. And I know this is really difficult. And until you start practicing it and feeling it, letting go, the process of letting go is simply taking in a deep breath, relaxing, and releasing that feeling, whatever it is you're feeling, whatever the negative emotion you're feeling, fear, guilt, anger, apathy, whatever it is. It's acknowledging that you're feeling it, and then you're relaxing, taking in a deep breath, relaxing, and then releasing it. And until you start doing this during your day, you won't really understand the power of relax and release. But try it today. Anytime you feel some sort of negativity, some anxiety, some worry, some doubt, some fear, some disbelief, catch yourself, and in that moment, just take in a deep breath, relax your shoulders, and then release the feeling. Just let it go. We don't have to walk around. Somehow we have this idea that we've got to be uptight all the time in some way.
Can I make a comment, Steve?
Yeah, hold on one second, though. Go ahead.
Yeah, chapter 2, which is the mechanics of letting go, is a step-by-step, just like you just described. You contemplate the fear, and then you let it manifest without any judgment or anything, and then basically after that, you just release it. But there are more steps than that.
Again, I would encourage all of you just today, whenever you feel any negativity, be aware of it. Be aware that it's just what?
Temporary.
It's a feeling. It's a feeling. And feelings are like the weather. What does that mean?
They come and go.
They come and go. And so rather than resisting the feeling, embrace it, breathe it in, and release it. One of the things I've started doing at the end of the day is just I sit, I get quiet, and I just let go mentally of any negativity. As I read through this, again, we're working through the progressions of negative emotion to positive emotion. Force, negative emotion; power, positive emotion; fear versus love. And life is about letting go of all the negative stuff. And when you let go of all the negative stuff, because it's all temporary, what are you left with? What are you left with? You're left with who you really are. And who you really are whether you want to believe it or not, who you really are, you're perfect. You're perfect. You are infinite possibility. You are one with life. That's who you really are. And we have to let go of our resistance. We are so much greater than we imagine. Again, we buy into all the negative thoughts we have about ourselves, and we resist. Even I don't even know if we have them. If we do have them, we resist anything positive.
Is this the same process that he talks about in the chapter on desire and like setting goals and then letting go of them?
Yeah. I mean,
Be really
the
specific.
next chapter on desire is basically, what is he saying? Whatever you want, you can have instantly.
Well, I really like that apartment story,
Right.
but I was just struggling with, okay, well, what do? You write it all down, and then how do you?
Well, again, I think you have to, sit with this, and realize how much how much have we all bought into the idea that success takes forever, that it's a grind, you have to work really hard. And if you don't have to work really hard and it doesn't take a whole lot of time, then it's what?
It's not real. It's not.
It's unworthy. It's unworthy.
Right.
I mean, what the book did for me, it just starts making, it flips your ideas, our programming. This idea that success can only happen if we push and struggle and strain and work really hard. That's our programming. That's what we've been programmed to believe. And the idea that we can have whatever we want instantly, we've been programmed to believe what?
Bullshit.
That's total bullshit.
I love it.
That's total bull. Now, I mean, it makes you think. It stops you in your tracks. What if you let go of the idea that I've got to struggle, I've got to strain, I've got to work harder than anybody else, I've got to be better than anyone else? What if we let that go?
Fuck that Protestant bullshit.
That's the power here.
Hey, Steve.
Hold on. And it's up to each and every one of you to make up your own mind on this. Realize that you've been programmed your entire life by what?
False beliefs.
Fear.
Other people's beliefs. We've been programmed our entire life by other people's beliefs to the point that they become what?
Our beliefs.
Our beliefs. Our beliefs. And now all of this work is a wake-up call to say, wait a second. Who made this shit up? Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, I've been really on this thing where like I'm realizing through meditation and like that it's a program that's just running. Like, and I remember being at Universal Studios with my kids on the Back to the Future ride. And like you're in this thing and like I'm freaking out because I hate roller coasters and I feel like I'm gonna throw up and I'm like in this world. And then all of a sudden I look over to the right and the illusion is completely wrecked because I see that I'm just sitting in this fucking room.
Right.
And I'm like, wait a second. But if I look here, I like I'm falling off a cliff. But if I just look over here, I'm in this fucking room. And it's the same thing with my thoughts where I'm like, oh, it's just coming at me. But if I step back for a second, I'm like, well, I'm the person watching the thoughts. The thoughts are just randomly generated. And I don't have to go, if I go with them, if I choose to go with them, it's going to be crazy. But I can just look over to the side and realize I'm just in the fucking room.
Well, I have the same experience. Anyone who rides a Peloton bike, if you do the scenic tour,
Hmm.
when you're riding downhill, it seems way easier than when you're riding uphill. And yet, what are you actually doing?
Not the same thing.
You're the same thing. You're sitting on this bike that's not moving anywhere. And yet when you're looking at a picture going down the hill, the bike pedals so much easier than when you're climbing up the Alps. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. It's just perception. It's just perception.
It's all illusion, and you got to buy into it if you're
Yep.
gonna.
And that's why if we stop buying into our fears and we stop buying into our negativity, again, just think about how easy it is to buy into false beliefs about ourselves and how much resistance there is to buy into our inherent nature of perfection, infinite possibility, and one with life. That's who we actually are. And yet we resist that every single day because we want to believe that we're not that. And again, it all ties into survival. It all ties into survival, this fear of not surviving. Newsflash for all of you, you have survived. That game is over. That game is over. It's not about survival. You have survived. You outlived the saber-toothed tigers. Nothing's coming to get you. Now it's about thriving. So anyway, we'll continue down this path. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Steve.
You're welcome.